Hajime!
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is General Lance here. I'm at the War Room, and I have a special treat for us. I have a GWOT vet from, the Iraq War joining us today. Ed, welcome on.
Thank you, Lance. Big time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well,
huge opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, it's a huge opportunity for me. I think one of the formative experiences for myself and the younger generation, well, maybe for of my age, well, I was a kid and actually lived, in Alexandria when the Pentagon was hit. I was actually not so far away, and I remember everything that happened from there and how kind of the vibe of the United States changed. I mean, from day to night. And I remember, being in school and watching TV and watching the invasion of Iraq, first of all, shock and awe and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, as the odyssey of that conflict drew on, I remember seeing guys in the, camis, shooting it out with insurgents and so on. And I was thinking to myself since a young age, I was like, damn, I want to be that guy right there. Those were my heroes. And so I'm really proud today to be able to talk to one of my heroes today. So, Ed, I think we actually connected because I was actually sharing by happenstance a picture of, and I will share it below, which is a Blackwater picture with Army guys, Army soldiers in the background on the rooftop, and they were exfiltrating. It's like one of these iconic pictures you have. You usually see it as an Iraq War allusion to Blackwater, but also, the situation that happened in that situation. But, you reached out to me and you said, oh, that reminds me of something. And I guess I had to have you on this transmission just so that way you could share with us what exactly happened there and what your personal experiences were there.
Yeah, so I can't remember if it was 2004 or 2003, but Firebase Melody was a campus, an old college dorm campus that we had raided in the middle of the night and took over. And that became our fire base. So 136 Infantry, all those guys were there. And then, of course, you had other every once in a while I'd have like Air Force guys come in or whatever. Just different dudes would come in from different parts of the Army. But basically what happened was there was a mortar attack on that fire base, and those guys up there are scouts and infantrymen, and the blood is from shrapnel. And those guys, nobody was KIA'd in that attack, but
really, huh?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
Yep. But there was shrapnel wounds, so there was quite a few Purple Hearts that day.
And if I remember correctly, this is 2003, right? So this is during the initial invasion and occupation of Iraq, right?
Well, so the Marines invaded. 4th ID just followed up on the Marines, or with the Marines. And then I was with 1st Armor, who relieved 4th ID. And it was 1st Cav and 1st Armor basically at the same time in that area of operation. So Baghdad.
Mm-hmm. And you were an infantryman, right? If I remember correctly.
I was a scout, a 19 Delta, in a scout platoon attached to an infantry battalion. So I was in HHC, the headquarters and then we had the tankers, and so like 237, 237 was a tanker battalion that was also attached to 136, or at least we were there at Firebase Melody.
And to give people reference, for those of you who are, a bit younger than me and maybe like, not as well caught up in the history of the deployment there, what happened initially in the invasion of Iraq was basically, if anyone has watched Generation Kill, the guys went in, obviously, destroyed the Iraqi army. Debathification happened. It was a bunch of just chaos as far as the civilian sector was concerned. The Iraqi nationals were very confused politically, because I'm sure you're probably going to be able to explain to us how this dynamic works, but let me just finish the synopsis so that way people understand what's happening. So there's this chaos going on, political chaos between the Iraqis. Obviously, every Iraqi is pissed off at the Americans and the coalition forces. And then, of course, there are the, when you invade a country, what you're doing is you're sending your first echelon units. You're going through, they completely buried the Iraqi army. And then what happens is occupation. And so during this occupation phase is when I believe Ed is where he comes in, right, in 2003, and he's at this fire base, and this is in downtown Baghdad, right?
Right.
And Baghdad is this place that is the nexus outside of a couple key areas of resistance. It is the place which had the most IED strikes. It had the most. It was the nexus for Iranian proxy militias, as well as Ba'ath hardliners who were resisting, as well as Sunni Islamists, and it was just this fuck crazy hell on earth. And again, I wasn't there. This is me reading it, right, by proxy from many different veterans and from the history books, and that's what I keep on hearing, is that basically it was hot as balls, but it wasn't as I guess maybe some guy. I remember my buddy who was an Iraq vet. He said that I think I would rather have done my tour in hell, because that was hotter than heck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess I wanted to ask you a bunch of questions, and I wanted to start with what were like when you touched down, and everyone has a 9/11 story, and I'm sure that's really important to you. But I think what's most important is I want you to tell us what were your first feelings that you had when you got off and you were with your unit, staged and deployed, and you just were there for the first night in your AO, conducting ops or settling in. What were the feelings that you were having? What was the sentiment, and what was the first few memories that you were having? Going through your head, anything.
Yeah. So I think it really altered my perception of weather and climate and things like that when we first got to Kuwait. The temperatures were something I've never experienced before. It was like a blow dryer blowing in your face. So just climatizing to the region was like a big deal. I think it was like 25 days or something like that before we even rolled into Iraq. But it's just such a foreign place compared to America. I know that we all felt like, so we had a pep talk meeting before we rolled out. I have pictures of this stuff too. It's awesome. But guys were burning their cigarettes, and we were in a huddle, and we were all of.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
All those trucks are all of our Humvees were lined up and ready to convoy out in sections all the way to the heart of Iraq, Baghdad, to the BIOP. At the time, it was the Saddam Hussein airport. But basically, our platoon sergeant, who I'm going to connect you with later, but he said we weren't going to make it back. Many of us would not make it back. So it was really, we were all young 18-year-olds, mostly EMs. and we're just trying to deal with this potentiality of dying over here in the Middle East, not knowing, you know, what we know now or believe now or whatever about the war, but it was real. Thomas theorem, you know, we're going to behave based on what we perceive to be true and real. That's what we were all doing. We thought we were excited. There's a ton of adrenaline, and there was this other side, like our leg was in the other side of like kind of a. Oh man, can you hear me, Lance?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. No problem.
Okay, my earbud just kicked out from me. Okay, so yeah, so I mean, it was just a lot of fear. We were young guys, but we were at the same time we were very charged up with adrenaline, and a lot of us did believe that we weren't going to make it home. And so yeah, I mean, how else should I answer this? I mean, you might have to pick these things out of my head.
And so it's interesting to hear, because it's like, you know, I think a lot of people, they see the conflict through the eyes of the newspapers, right? What the newspapers say and all the political implications, just like you prefaced your experience, you know, you didn't know. I mean, who cares? At the end of the day, like, what happened was that you were doing what was right, and ultimately you were called on. You know, we got straight up attacked, and like, how are we supposed to know the intricacies of the intrigue, you know, of you know, some asshole up there doing stuff or not doing stuff, or like whatever.
Right.
At the end of the day, like, what I think is the most beautiful thing, and why I've like fallen in love with, you know, the warrior spirit, is that, you know, it's more about the crucible that you're experiencing, which you felt when you were just starting to step off and you're convoying to this ancient place. I mean, truly ancient place. Remember, before the Americans had been, it was, you know, the Persians and the Arabs, and before that, it was the freaking hell. It was the Romans. You know, I don't know if you
Right.
know. Yeah, the Romans, and then the Babylonians, and so on. And so, to have tread in the same footsteps and marching paths of so many that had gone before you, was surely probably. I mean, it probably struck you in some way, at least, to be in this ancient place amidst ancient people. But at the same time, like, I think what was happening within your heart or your soul, and forgive me if like if I'm projecting here, right? Because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that fundamental dynamic, right? Of the, oh shit, I might die, but I have to do my job, and I also have to look out for my boys who I've been training up with for, you know, training up for this deployment, doing what I have to do, and making peace with this. I remember this Vietnam vet said, you can only start doing your job once you believe yourself to be dead, and this is the dynamic that's going on from what I hear. And obviously, you know, you go back and forth in your head, I suppose. But when you're convoying in, and I wanted to ask you that question. So you're going in from Kuwait, which is in the south of the city, and you're in that convoy, and you start to enter Baghdad, and you kind of see that dusty haze in the distance.
Yes.
What's your experience? Do you remember, like, what thinking to yourself, and what were your boys thinking? What were they saying to you? Just any thoughts like that coming to you?
There was a lot of comms, a lot of talk on the radios, a lot of excitement, and a lot of. So I was a gunner. You know, all the gunners were told to get ready for anything, be ready for whatever, you know, and like the ROEs were really loose, and it was like basically destroy anything that looks suspicious.
Right.
So we were just that ROE alone, and just being so young, and basically, you know, having never, you know, we were still virgins in the sense of, you know, combat. All we had was training and stuff and gunnery, but it was go time. It was real. And there was so many more people as we got closer to the city, and every person, you just felt like it could be that person or this person that, you know, tries to shoot you or whatever. Because at the time there wasn't IEDs.
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
So like, when I was rolling through, that was right when basically Saddam was releasing prisoners, or he had just released all the prisoners. So like a few months later, that's when all the the IEDs were starting to be made, and a lot of casualties were starting to pile up, and basically that changed the game, or changed our tactics and everything.
Mm.
The demand for up armored Humvees and all that stuff changed. The way guys would scan with their turrets, left and right in their turrets, that all became more intense, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And I
so,
guess I guess I wanted to ask you, because I think a lot of people, they don't know, like, these streets are crowded. It's just full
yeah,
of crap. It's full of people, and just to finish what Ed had begun to say, was there was basically in the beginning, a lot of these insurgents, they fought along terms of conventional ambushes. So they would set up L-shaped ambushes, or they do basic stuff. And as time went on, things became more intricate, more like sneaky, more underhanded, IEDs and everything like that. But I guess what I wanted to ask you is, like, what was it like interfacing, with the civilians there? What was, could you read their faces? What were they thinking? You know, like, do you think that, I don't know, like, what were thoughts going through your head and through the head of your friends when that was happening?
yeah. So this was really interesting. Like the kids loved us, Mista, chocolata, chocolata, or they would expect us to give them things, and it was almost like they thought of us as a good, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was almost like the weather change. So like one day, the kids all throughout wherever we were, So I was a scout, and we would roll through the streets in our Humvees and stuff, patrolling. But some days they would throw rocks at us and hate us. It was just like, those mosque towers with the
Yes.
big speaker, and the sheiks sing through those speakers.
Mm-hmm.
They did something that impacted the way the youth were thinking from day to day. It was weird. We didn't know what to expect anytime we rolled out.
I see.
Yeah, it was different almost every time.
So can you explain to us what your mission set was, and just for those people that don't know, like, army stuff and all that, like, can you explain, like, what your armament was, what it looked like, what you guys were dressed out as, and what you usually do as far as when you went out and patrolled, this term. So for those of you who don't know, you go into a little base, operating base, and then you patrol, which is basically, head out and take the streets, you interface with locals and all that stuff. But I wanted to ask you what your mission set was, what you were responsible for, and where exactly within Baghdad were you, like, was your AO?
We were in East Baghdad. We were tasked out for a few different things. We did over 400 raids. We did a lot of detaining of Ba'ath Party members. And these are like personal things that I've done with my platoon. Mm-hmm. A lot of raids, a lot of detaining of Ba'ath Party members, ex-military, the former military brass generals and whatnot. We would just show up at their house with interpreters and make arrests. We were tasked to convoy. Well, it was I'm having a brain fart. But basically, our XO or any officers that needed security through the city, as from like the green zone, for example, back to the fire base or whatever, we were the guys that would escort. We were escorting officers throughout the city when needed. And then we were also quick reaction force. So we called that QRF. And anytime there was an emergency or whenever we were needed, a bomb blast or IED went off or a rocket attack or whatever, we would just within like 3 minutes, ammo all loaded up in our guns, our crew serves, radios up, trucks running, and everybody's rolling out the gate within 3 minutes from our AOs. So
I
really
see.
fast. Yeah,
So
and it
you're
was
QRF, right? That's what it sounds like, right?
for the almost the entire deployment. We were just always out in sector doing like rush type stuff every day, basically.
So for those of you that don't know, and forgive me, Ed, here, because I'm thinking about the audience and trying to tell them what it looks like, what you're doing. So a lot of units, when they're like responsible for occupying a sector, they usually stay there for a while. They're within, they're pretty static. Obviously, they stay there for their deployment. But what he was doing was basically they're part of an elite formation, and what is a QRF is basically the higher echelon units that are sent to kind of put out fires, right? Or if something is happening and like the guys that are on the ground in the area, taking the fight to the enemy, or usually have been attacked by the enemy, and they're disoriented, they need backup. This is what Ed was doing. Ed was out there with his platoon, giving support to friendly elements, defeating insurgents, in addition to, of course, like fires and whatever that he'd probably bring with him, And so a lot of this can be really taxing because Baghdad, if you see it on a map, it's this massive slum-like, country, city. It's a labyrinth. It's difficult to get back and forth. It's wicked hot every day. And if I remember correctly, there was no AC really in the early vehicles, like that worked pretty well, right?
Right. Right.
Tell us something about the early vehicles that you had to work with.
Well, they were just that really thin. They weren't up armored Humvees. They were the slant backs, so we'd have our spare tire on the back. It was so hot that initially we would take our doors off, the front doors, so the driver would have no door, and the truck commander would have no door.
That's ballsy. Holy shit!
It was, and until grenades started to magically be thrown into Humvees, so the populace in Baghdad, or I would say the fighters there, they started to get smart and more brave. You just be turning a left or a right around a corner, and some stranger will chuck a grenade right into your Victor, and really messed guys up that way. So doors went back on. It was just a lot of trial and error trying to figure out how to do this, because we were all new to it. All of our tactics were still based on jungle warfare, basically, and urban conflict was basically being developed as we were there.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Is it that we didn't learn anything from Vietnam or from... Because I know the Gulf War was entirely fought over open plains, so that was really kind of irrelevant. So there was no MOUT for you guys?
No what?
There was no, urban warfare, like, developed, like, teaching
Right.
or anything like that?
Right. It was all, like, all of our training manuals and things are references that we used as guidance for our training and whatnot as scouts, as 19 Deltas. And I believe for infantry as well. At the time, so 03, it was just Vietnam era stuff.
I see. Huh.
So when, I don't know why there wasn't something from Desert Storm, but it was all jungle warfare stuff that we were trying to alter and make fit for urban conflict, urban combat.
Really? That's incredible. Because I think if I remember correctly, I mean, obviously you're obviously right. I mean, you were there. You know what I mean? Didn't get the training on it, and I was thinking to myself, that's crazy because the American military goes through these phases where it learns, urban warfare. I mean, World War II, we had that institutional knowledge, especially the Army. Then later we had Vietnam, where we, fought very intimately in big cities with insurgents in the same kind of situation. And it's funny that we just forget these things, and then suddenly we have to relearn them all over again, simply because we don't want to hold on to the knowledge that we gained so painfully the first time.
Right. Just to be clear, though, I mean, certainly there was a way to raid a building or clear a room, right? Like that's been, but just, I guess, general urban warfare, you know, battle loaded Humvees, patrolling through a city, all of that stuff, I think this is what I was told anyway by my commander. It was just like we were learning this stuff for the first time, basically. And obviously, you know, guys have done it in previous wars, but as far as manuals go, I don't understand. It was strange.
So it was definitely just you're learning as you go. It sounds like you're learning as you go in 130-degree heat with people that freaking hate you, want to kill your guts out, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So how about this? How about you tell us of a time when you were doing a raid specifically and it went wrong?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So we set up concertina wire. Well, the infantry guys set up concertina wire at a traffic section. Mm-hmm. So basically at the time, let me back up. We were getting a lot of insurgents from, I think, Iran and Pakistan or something like that. So I think Iran for sure, maybe Syria too. Fighters would come in to fight us, and we were setting up traffic control sites in the middle of intersections, and we would inspect cars that look suspicious or whatever, and sometimes we would just inspect 100% of the cars. This night in particular, we had a little red Volkswagen Passat with a sunroof. And those were notorious. I got more stories on these guys. They're everywhere in Baghdad, basically. It rolled through our traffic checkpoint. It wouldn't stop. And so he got hosed down with some 240 Bravo, 50 cal, all this stuff. It was kind of crazy. But we had a guy in our platoon get hit in the leg by another soldier. And it's just, I guess it went wrong. You know, the whole setup was wrong. I mean, we had 136 guys all around basically this. And then when something went wrong, you had, you know, fratricide basically. I mean, nobody got killed, but on our side. But,
so it sounds like that guy got hit, right? So it sounds
he's a good buddy of mine in my platoon, actually.
Is he doing okay?
Yeah, he's doing great. He's fully good. It was just one of them wild nights, you know. It was probably 10 o'clock at night. And the thing is, like, he was shot a couple times before he even, for a couple minutes minutes went by before he even realized it.
Huh. That's crazy. So when you get shot, like, I guess you don't immediately feel it. Is it the adrenaline or something like that? Is it?
I think so. I mean, it was like M4s or M16s, 5.56 rounds, mm-hmm. Ankle and the calf, I think. He stayed in theater. He didn't get sent home or anything. He stayed, and he was just he was on crutches for a month maybe, and then he was back out in sector with us. But yeah, I mean, that's just one thing that went wrong. And I say I kind of prioritize that because that was kind of really wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Like I felt like some leadership should have been in trouble for that. But what else? I had some that went right and were really awesome.
Yeah. Tell me about that one.
Yeah. So we had this opportunity to work with Special Forces. I think it was 9th Group. Basically 9th Group, they were making some sort of deal with some Iraqis, they were buying artillery rounds and dressed up like Iraqis themselves. And so to support those guys, we were behind, like a block away. And our job was to, as soon as we got the call to come in, basically bull rush these Iraqis that sold the artillery rounds.
Oh, I see. So it's like an interdiction, right?
Yeah, yes. It was so awesome because it was the first time I worked with these guys. And we ended up, so basically we ran around the corner up to these guys after we got the call, detained these guys really quick, and then went and cleared the building, and then got on top of the roof and just kind of observed everything from the top, and just see the SF guys take off their, I forgot what it's called, but that white gown that Iraqis wear. They took all that off, and they were in civilians. Like, I think one guy was wearing like a Tommy Hilfiger shirt or something. Just, these guys had beards, and just, it was just so freeing to see that's something that you could choose to be if you could make it. There was like this, it's like, wow, that's what I want to do someday, kind of on in my head. And just, I felt so little because I'm just like clearing all these empty rooms in this big building. But it was for these guys, and it was such a huge.
Tell us a little bit more. So, explain to the audience. Who is the ninth group? What are they? Are they the Green Berets, if I remember correctly, or are they the Delta or something like that? I forgot.
Yeah. So, ninth group is a special forces unit. I think they're out of Utah. But the reason why I'm saying ninth group is because outside of the biop was a hill, and the special forces guys, they would rotate out. During my deployment over there, SF guys would rotate out, so it would be different teams from time to time. But I believe it was ninth group there, and they had they had the retrans site set up, comms, the big tower up there on the hill, and it's just, I think it was my platoon sergeant or something told me that it was ninth group, but we were working with them at the time. And yeah.
So as a young gun, obviously you probably thought you were hot shit when you're going out there because you're in the cav, you're like fucking, you're kicking ass and all that stuff. Handsome young stud, and then you go on a mission with these guys, and you're like, holy fuck, you don't even know what you got, you know what I mean, as in how little you are compared to these guys, and
yeah,
and obviously not disparaging, but that's just the feeling you get, right? You're next to these titans, you know what I'm saying? And so was this feeling was there really truly a training disparity? Did you feel like you guys weren't as squared away or high speed as they were, you know what I mean? Was there this feeling that they were the shit?
There was the feeling that they were the shit for sure. I mean, these guys, so we were so much controlled by how we're supposed to dress. You always have to be shaven. Everybody is in uniform. Uniformity is everything, in regular Army. These guys were completely different from one another. I mean, yeah, they had the same Kevlar, IBAs or whatever, plates and stuff, basic issue stuff. But, one guy would be wearing blue jeans. One guy would have a 9mm. Another guy would have I don't know, I think an MP5 that maybe he got from an Iraqi or something. I don't know, just different things. They just had so much more freedom. But the one thing that we knew was these guys operated in smaller groups and had more trust between one another than a regular Army platoon could ever have. Mm-hmm. And it's that. And at the time, I wanted to be a careerist. I wanted to kind of climb. Before deployment, I had a Ranger packet. I was going to go to Ranger school and things like that. And I was, that was just something I saw myself doing. And it was always this thing far into the future. And it was one day I'm going to achieve this kind of thing. And just being with these guys and seeing how different they operate, how you know that they're very disciplined, but on the outside it looks like they're kind of like cowboying it up,
Right.
in a way.
Right.
And it was just so I don't want to say jealous, but it was like you want that.
Right.
It was like something that you yearn for someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. It's like almost inspiring. It's like seeing a hero
Yeah.
on the battlefield. You're like, I want to be that guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like seeing Tom Brady on the football field. You know, you're like, I got to be that guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I guess the greater question is, you know, I guess this was one time, but what was your day to day like? And you and I both know like how boring garrison can be, but what was day to day in Iraq like? What was the experience with your boys? What was that stand out to you? What was a typical day?
Yeah. So the way I remember it, our sleep was very irregular. It was like get sleep when you can. And we were always kind of sleep deprived. Like one day, like the Baghdad hotel bombing would happen, and we would be out front for 72 hours without sleep, and you're just like a zombie, still somehow being, checking the box, pulling security, all that stuff, but you're just so out of it and numb. And then you'll get sleep, and it might just be like 30 minutes or a couple hours. It never felt like it was enough sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and before you had to, the QRF bell would rattle, and you'd have to run down to the trucks and go out again. And it was just like that. You're always thirsty, always hungry, always tired. And somehow, I don't know, it was just kind of a miracle that our bodies can do that for a prolonged time, 15, 16 months.
No small dose of what was it called? Rippets?
Rip it. Oh yeah.
Caffeine, I guess, and coffee and all that. I think after a while it doesn't work as well as it initially did, right? I think after a while you just get fucked,
I don't even remember. I remember a lot of tobacco, but I don't remember coffee.
Really?
I don't remember us drinking coffee. Yeah, that's weird. I don't remember us drinking coffee at all. Anybody in my platoon.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
But we would have like care boxes of chewing tobacco and cigarettes, socks and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Really cool stuff. And we were running on tobacco, like everybody.
How long was your deployment, by the way?
16 months.
Jeez.
Yeah, we got extended twice.
Oh my god.
And that's when, after that second extension, that's when soldiers started to get really stressed out. I mean, you had guys pulling their weapon on each other, just all kinds of nasty crap happening.
I feel like they're getting to the end of their tether, though. Like, think about it. Like, you're just saying, you're sleep deprived, you're freaking everything, you're stressed every day, cortisol, adrenaline, obviously probably seeing a buddy or two get hurt or worse, and obviously you're bringing violence on people, and that also takes its toll a little bit too. And so think about like that day in, day out, month after month, and 16 months is no joke. For those of you listening, 16 months is no joke. And I remember like you watched that documentary that many of you are exposed to, Restrepo, which is in Afghanistan. And they were out there for 13 months, and that was already starting to show, even in their military discipline, they were starting to not like shave as much. You could tell like they were starting not to wear their gear properly and stuff like that, keeping their fob squared away like they used to in the first few months. And so like it takes this, and this is not an indictment on them or anyone. I'm just saying that this is a monumental task that any warfighter going out there has to understand. It's like, yeah, like many people say, oh, being a soldier is really easy. Like, you don't have to really learn hard stuff or whatever. But the trick is it's easy to understand, but it's hard to do, right? When you're super tired, when you're, sleep deprived, you feel dumb, you're like constantly stressed out, and you got 1,000 things on your mind. You got, responsibilities. You're responsible not just for yourself, but your buddies, people around you, and all that. And so, I mean, I completely understand that. Some people will be like, "Oh, that wouldn't be me. I wouldn't do that. Those guys are shitbags." And I think they've never been in the position you have been, where you're being put to the task. Your nuts are to the fire for 16 months, and sometimes, obviously, you have to have discipline, but like that's kind of understandable in the circumstances. But I wanted to say or ask, so contractors, right?
Yeah.
PMCs.
Yeah.
And that's actually how we connected, you and I, just talking about Blackwater on that rooftop. The reason why I wanted to bring it back is because it seems as though this is where the PMC, quote-unquote, mercenaries, contractors, really made their impact. Iraq first, and then later Afghanistan in a small measure. But before that, for those of you who don't know, legionaries out there, like, contracting work wasn't as prominent, and it certainly wasn't as developed. And the reason being is that the conflicts that we engaged in prior were very sharp, kinetic, conventional conflicts. I mean, you name it. For instance, the Gulf War was entirely mechanized warfare, air-land battle, fucking literally NATO doctrine type shit,
Right.
But this was the first conflict where we were dealing intimately with the populace, where we were not simply fighting insurgents and regular army enemy, but we were also engaging with civilians. We were trying to arbitrate justice. We were trying to make sure that their basic living considerations were being met. And the reason why is because if we weren't meeting them, guess who was? The very people that we were trying to defeat. And so this is where Eric Prince comes in, and a number of people, and brings in Blackwater. And I just wanted to ask you, what was your experience, perceptions of your friends, of your officers with them, interactions you may have had, or anything that stuck out? Really just give us the shotgun blast of perception here.
Yeah, the perception that was going around, the way I remember it was, it was a kind of a negative thing. It was like all these, these guys with the fancy up armored black Suburbans or whatever, Yukons, wearing cargo pants and polo shirts, with fancy toys and stuff like that worked a couple hours a day or whatever. It was kind of like the off the cuff vibe that I was getting from everybody. I had never worked side by side with any of these Blackwater guys. I would see him at the BIOP towards the end of, like towards the end of our deployment at the airport, the BIOP, which is the only experience I had with Blackwater is when they got RPG'd by a red Passat with the sunroof,
right,
as they were coming into maybe a mile out from the BIOP, and we were QRF at the BIOP, and we rolled out, and those guys died. Yeah, didn't get their names, didn't get to know anything about them other than just they didn't make it. The Suburban was on fire, and the guys inside were gone.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Do you mind I guess visualizing for us what it looked like when you arrived at the location of the attack?
Yeah, it was like so you have two roads. You have a north and a south, and one's coming in to the BIOP, and one's coming, the other way. So you have this median in between the two. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So it's like one-way traffic in and one-way traffic out, and
with a curb in the middle, like an island or something.
I don't remember curb, but it could be. It's just kind of a grassy median, but it's kind of unkept.
I see.
And it was just, yeah, the Suburban was on fire, just there. No car. It was just reports. I think that's what it was. So, those guys rolled in pairs, in groups of two. It's like, so two Suburbans, and when one was hit with an RPG, the other guys got the radio for help or something like that. And I think that's how we had learned that, because I think a part of my platoon went out and looked for a red Passat, trying to find these guys. And I don't think anybody found them because they were back in the city. But and what's so devastating is like,
was it during the day, by the way?
It was during the day. Yes.
And were there a lot of people, civilians around?
No, because it was just like, so you have Baghdad, and then you got to drive, I don't know, 15 minutes down maybe 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes down a stretch of highway, you know, and before you get to the airport. Mm-hmm. And
this is the 2004 freaking ambush that happened, right? That was on the news and all that crazy stuff where they were hanged or something? Or is this a different incident?
This is different.
Okay.
Yeah, this is different. Yeah. So I'm fuzzy on all that other stuff, because I think we didn't get a lot of news, to be honest, when we were there. Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about that stuff. I just want to hear about your experience. Yeah, don't worry about that stuff.
Yeah.
So like from what I read, and like you read that apparently the casualties and the deaths were way higher with contractors than with regular Army. And you know, I guess like, you know, you talk about like how these guys got ambushed and they got completely whacked, and it sounds like they didn't have any resistance, able to offer any resistance whatsoever, right? Is that what happened?
I mean, that's the way I kind of look at it, is because, you know, we had a gunner with a turret. These guys didn't. These guys are just driving around in unmarked vehicles that look like Fed vehicles. You know what I mean? They just look like, and they stick out like a sore thumb throughout Baghdad or wherever they're traveling. So in my opinion, I love Eric Prince and I love Blackwater. I still do. I still love, you know, the idea of contracting. I think it's like an awesome idea for the future of, you know, security and things like that, military operations and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it was almost kind of an arrogance to just think you can go out there and look, you know, like you stand out.
Yeah, like thumbing your nose at these people. Yeah.
For these guys have RPGs, and you know they get the intel that we got. You know, so it's kind of, in hindsight, it's sad. It's really sad to me, but
yeah, it is.
It is what it is. You know, just it's war. It's ugly.
Yeah, no, and like I get that, and I think, you know, I was reflecting on myself because it seems like there was a lot of people characterize American forces with arrogance, or the Americans in general. They call us arrogant when we arrive in places, and you know, did you feel that that's how the civilians perceived us or your unit when you were like out and about and mingling with these people? Like, did it ever get to the case where you were maybe off duty and experiencing these individuals in Baghdad, like, you know, in a more friendly dynamic?
No, it just, I don't know. You know what it's like when you walk up to a group of cops, like at Dunkin' Donuts or something like that? Mm-hmm. It's like you're kind of minding your P's and Q's, but you're trying to be normal at the same time. Mm-hmm. It was like I detected that, and you know, like, it's just like, you know, they don't want to give off this impression that they don't want to bring unnecessary attention to themselves, I think. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was the vibe I had. So yeah, just they were mostly friendly. Uh-huh. As far, you know, and so we, like, for example, at our fire base, you know, we hired Iraqis. They worked on our Humvees. They did housekeeping around our building. They were our interpreters. You know, obviously, interpreters were important. But also, like, the barber. Like, this guy would have like a sharp razor and he would have it right up against your neck, and he could totally
Slice you open, yeah.
he could totally do that, you know. And it every time I sat in that chair to get a haircut, I always felt like he could do it. And you know, but he also seemed nice, and I just went with it. It was kind of weird though, because you think about a few years ago, we had quite a few terrorist attacks, I guess you can call them. You know, Iraqis, or not Iraqis, but excuse me, I don't want to say the wrong words, but like Middle Easterns here in the United States, they would do a shooting attack, like a mass shooting kind of thing, and it was almost like something like that could happen. When we were there, I was thinking that way. This guy could just slice any soldier's neck and just say, you know, Allahu Akbar, and
interesting. And like, I guess that kind of begs the question. You know, how did like soldiers like perceive the enemy? Like, did they think it was just one amorphous like dude with a gun, or were you guys able to pick out people that were like, I don't know, let's say like Iranian proxies or Baathists, or like, could you tell faction from within the foe? Were there any specific dudes that you respect somehow, like in combat, or were there any truly ignoble enemies that you came across? What was the general kind of vibe going on there?
I felt like the enemy, they didn't get close enough to us. Those guys were always at a distance, and they were more lethal because they were the IED makers, or the guys with RPGs. They, you know, and they had like a look in their eye. For example, we were driving once, right by this group of guys that were pulling something out of a trunk of a car, and they were looking at us like they wanted, like kind of like a bully staring at a guy, and he's got his eyes, and he hates you, and you feel it in your soul that this guy is just despises you. And it was like we were creeping downtown, and this guy just looked totally out of place. This little car with three guys, and they were pulling something out of the trunk of their car, and I pointed my finger at them, and then their whole demeanor changed and everything. And sometimes I wonder, like, if those guys were gonna pull out like an RPG gun and shoot one of our guys, you know, one of our trucks or whatever. Just because that's how it worked.
It was very pop. It sounds like pop shots. That's what it sounds like.
That's exactly what, like the AK-47 fire, small arms fire. It was almost always pop shots, and there was always a multitude of people. So you could never like identify the shooter unless you saw him, you know, in action. But the whole time you're scanning all these people all the time. So they got really good at like just, you know, their tactics with shooting, I think, got really good. They would only shoot out of windows, or
were
they would pop the corner.
Were they good marksmen, middling marksmen? How were they in general?
Poor marksmen. And I'm very thankful that there were a lot of these. Their AK-47s, which is what they widely used, they sawed the buttstocks off, you know, and so they would just kind of like aim it up to their chest, or bring the weapon up to their chest and kind of do this little spray, like a little burst, and that's not very accurate, you know. But
well, you're thankful for that.
Yeah, because it usually gave them away. At least you had a direction, and then, you know, in my platoon we didn't have any casualties from these guys.
So I guess I wanted to ask you something, and obviously it probably is, you know, I'm trying to ask it in such a way that's diplomatic and tactful, and so I hope you take it in good faith. But us Americans, we're not used to violence, period. Right. Especially nowadays, but especially not like deathly violence. I lived in Brazil, and you know, you see dead bodies, you see people die violently sometimes, and it's not irregular. But
Right.
as Americans, especially when you come from a good family, especially if you're, a church-going family, etc., these are things that are far from your mind, and especially that they're taught, to you in young age to avert, if that makes sense, to not glorify, and to behold with horror and kind of stuff like that. So you as a warrior, you're out there getting deployed, and I guess if you don't mind me asking, what was your first experience? I guess just experiencing death in the sense of seeing it with your own eyes, like right in front of you. What was your first experience with that? And if you don't mind sharing, if you don't want to share that, that's okay too.
No, no, I'm honored to. I remember this very clearly. So no one in my unit, no one in my battalion had died yet that I knew. And so there was a day where our, I guess he was an S shop guy, and he was attached to, well, he was driving our XO around. His name was William Maher, and you'll find him if you look him up. William Maher, Maher. He was driving our XO from the teardrop. I don't know if you know what that is. Martyrs Monument, the teardrop in Baghdad. And IED went off. I think it was a daisy-chained artillery round is what blew up. But it killed him. And I was on QRF. And we came to the site where his truck was deadlined, and he had his last few breaths. The XO was wounded, and the top mechanic was wounded. He was sitting in the back of the Humvee, and Mayer was driving. I think it was his left leg was cut off and in front of his face on the steering wheel. His hand was cut off, and because he had his right hand up on a rafter up on the ceiling of the Humvee, and the shrapnel sliced his knuckles and left in his fingers and the top in his knuckles were left there hanging. And this might sound a little graphic, but I think it's important.
It is important.
So when a bomb goes off, like what happened here, the glass on the windshield doesn't necessarily shatter and bust. So what happened was it expanded out and spidered. It's like spider cracks. And so, like, if you can imagine running your finger along the glass and across all the spider cracks, but not feeling the cracks at all. It just feels like a normal glass window. So it was just like that, except parts of his scalp were in the glass with hair on it and stuff. So the glass expanded out and then came back in on itself. I thought that was so weird, but that's when I went numb. And I think that's when so many of us in our platoon went numb, because that was a friend. Like, before deployment, we went to Austria and snowboarded in Innsbruck together, rented a Beamer, and he was married, and he was about to come back home to his kids, ETS out of the military. And it was just really, I never had so much hate in my heart after that, but it was so heavy, the hate, that you just become numb. And I remember a couple days later, we got into a firefight, and usually you want to run behind cover really quick, and so you don't get shot, like you're trying to like preserve yourself, and that wasn't there. Like it was like, fuck you, I'm gonna take you out, and I'm just gonna take the chance that you can't shoot. And it was almost like this kind of bravery that was almost it was like somebody injected morphine into me or something. And I couldn't feel the fear, I couldn't feel nothing. And I think so many of us got like that after Mayer's death. But that was the one pivotal moment, because it was like a couple of months into our deployment. And then that's when Baghdad, like, you think everything is real and everything is hard. and you think that you're going to come home after a while, like you're not going to die, and then your close friend dies,
Mm-hmm.
and then that reality squeezes your mind into a different dimension,
Mm-hmm.
one that you didn't even know that was possible. And so in this way, I just feel like we've grown into this different understanding than the average American citizen who doesn't understand. Like they know violence from the TV or hear about some violence, happening here occasionally, but they don't see the bodies. They don't see I don't know, the mortality,
Right.
the visceralness of it.
Right.
So
Before we move on, just can you give like his unit rank name so that way we can like honor him, straight
yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah, awesome. Yeah, specialist William Maher, 136 Infantry.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to have that in the description to remember him. And thanks for
You,
sharing that. But on a lighter note, so that way we don't keep, I know it's like a personal memory right there, and I don't want to trivialize it.
yeah,
But as a butter bar myself, one day, and you're enlisted, right? You were enlisted yourself.
yeah. I was a specialist when I was there.
Yeah. So, what made a good officer? What made a bad officer?
A good officer, I believe, was one that allowed for the platoon sergeant to manage his men. And that was the kind of lieutenant that I had when I was there. But he was also very firm on the ethics, the behavior. I think a lieutenant should have a high, like he should want his men to feel a high sense of morale. That's possible, at least.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's what I would say is like the platoon sergeant. He's been around a long time. Usually, I mean, there's bad platoon sergeants out there. Don't get me wrong, but I appreciated Lieutenant Fields, who was my LT, a great deal because he gave our platoon sergeant the freedom and the leeway to manage us, but also was firm in how he didn't let us go and get sadistic if it was easy to become sadistic. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he kept the spirit of our platoon in a manner that was respectable, I suppose.
And just this is just for the audience or for their benefit here. I guess like you hear stories like this. For instance, in Vietnam, like guys who are out in the wire, out in the middle of nowhere. They're experiencing crazy shit. Just like the story here that he relayed to us, like his buddy's dying, killing people, and that can kind of be a Heart of Darkness situation. That can be a Lord of the Flies situation where man starts becoming beast.
Yeah.
And in that morass, it's the officers and the non-commissioned officers that are responsible for the integrity and the honor of a unit. So, of course, you're a warfighter. You're supposed to be taking the fight to the enemy, being aggressive, doing all that stuff. But at the same time, not at the cost of your honor, not at the cost of making sure that keeping first of all your own soul clean, but also the soul of your friends and the unit that you represent, and everyone else. So I mean, I think that's incredibly important that you touched on, because many people talk about like, oh, what's a good officer? Like, do they know their job? Do they know this or that? No. Like, I think the first thing is being able to hold the reins on 40 plus high T dudes who are in a warfighting situation, who are clearly underslept, overstressed, overengaged,
Yep.
and you know what, like, it's just like you said, when shit starts hitting the fan, you have that kind of rage building up, and sometimes it can be hard to look past that mist, and that's really the prime quality of that officer, to make sure that crazy shit doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Things that don't happen, because ultimately, you can say, well, I don't care. Well, at the end of the day, the war effort depends on people being in control and having that discipline. Like, if you start going fucking crazy, cutting off people's ears and faces and stuff, like what ends up happening is, that turns the populace against you. They just see you as crazy. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so, absolutely important. And I don't know how much time you have left here, and I just wanted to, ask you a couple questions. But do you have
No, yeah, please, you can keep going. I'm enjoying this, and I think it's really good to see.
perfect? And,
Yeah.
and the reason why I'm asking is because I think so. When you're a young guy, and you're going to ROTC, or you're young enlisted, and you're reading these books. These books seem so remote. Okay, like there are books that are great. Matterhorn, or you read Fields of Fire, or whatever. About face. But at the end of the day, like hearing from the voices of guys that have been close to you in the sense of like, you're not that much older than me. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, you went to a conflict that was more similar to what we're experiencing today than what Vietnam was for those guys. And of course, we honor those heroes and stuff. But hearing from your voice, and especially I think there's this mistake in the military community that unless you're like super secret squirrel or whatever, that you're fucking not allowed to talk about military stuff. But I think it's really the linemen who are, we should be hearing stuff from, because that's what most of us are going to experience. But I guess what I wanted to ask you in regards to I guess the warrior mindset, and maybe just bring up an example of one of your buddies or one of the enlisted specifically that kind of really went above and beyond, that you just remember off the top of your head, of a situation that they kind of just, I don't know, just really stood out,
Yeah. I would say my platoon sergeant, Michael Livingston. Um, he was somebody who took over our platoon when we were in Germany, and all of our shit was broken in the arms room. All of our weapons mounts, our weapons. There was something wrong with basically everything. Bent barrels on our M4s. Our night vision were all screwed up. And I just remember one day he rolled out this map. So this was after 9/11, right? So, but he rolled out this big old map of Baghdad, and we had no idea that we were deploying. And he's like, "Men, we're all going here, and some of you ain't gonna make it back." And we're like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And he goes, "We're going." And he goes, "I need 6 men for a detail. I need 6 volunteers." I raised my hand. Some other guys raised their hands, and we got sent to Poland for 45 days. And it turned out that trip to Poland, we were guarding the SIPRNet for the plan of the Iraq War. And it was just like everybody from the Pentagon showed up, basically, and there was a ton of right arm PT, saluting just all day long, just standing there, blah, 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 and but my platoon sergeant, he's the one that, man, like the rest of the battalion was out partying on a Friday night. We were fixing our stuff in the arms room till like 3 a.m, and we would still get up at 6 a.m. for formation, and then we'd run.
Good to go.
Yeah. It was. We hated him at the time. We called him the Blue-Eyed Devil. But in hindsight, I am so thankful that I had a guy like that, because if you look at the MPs, the military police, who had a high percentage of women in their ranks in Baghdad at the time between 03 and 04, they had the highest casualties. Because he'd always say complacency kills. And that was an integral part to all our training. We just trained all the time. And I do think he's kind of a rare breed. for a platoon sergeant. And which we had nobody die in our platoon.
Hell yeah.
So that's really a big deal. And there was many instances. We were in IED attacks, we had RPG attacks. He got fragged. I got fragged. I have pictures of this stuff too. So on private line I could send it. But if it wasn't for that mentality and high standards for his soldiers, I think it was easy to say that many of us wouldn't make it back. Not saying that Baghdad was like some kind of I'm not trying to make Baghdad to be something worse than it was, but just the idea of driving in like an S shape, S formation down the road instead of just paralleling the side of the road all the time.
Right.
If you have a bad vibe or a bad feeling in your gut, veer the car next to you off the road a little bit, just to kind of get more space between you and whatever is giving you the creeps, because that's how things happened. Things just blew up, a cardboard box would blow up on you. And it was just like, just when in doubt, just steer clear, and that was against the rules basically. And he said, fuck it. We're going to do it this way because all my men are coming home. And I just appreciated that. Like, he bent some of the rules to protect us, but without screwing up the mission, So
I see what you're saying. And
yeah.
The interesting thing is, like, you bring up discipline, for instance, right? Like that's an example of discipline right there. Like, I guess the biggest issue now, if I remember right, is just like the lack of being able to enforce discipline. I mean, like, for instance, making people, stay after, do things, PT them, train them hard, drill them hard, expect high standards from individuals, high performance. But because nowadays, like, you almost get like punished for it, from higher or from anti-ostracization freaking initiatives and so on. The culture of the military in general has slackened significantly. But also there is this dynamic too, man. Like, too much discipline can cause a chafe, right? People can start just really fucking bucking. It's almost like a horse. You spur too hard, they start kicking you, right?
Yeah.
So I guess what I wanted to ask you is, like, in that circumstance, like you said, you kind of resented him at the time, but only when push came to shove, you after the fact you figured out it was good stuff. But, like, how is it that he maintained discipline, pushed you guys far without making you guys how do I say, like, I don't know, kick the rider from the horse kind of situation?
Yeah, so I would say the respect that we had for him was basically everything he had us do, he did with us. I mean, that was the biggest thing. He did it all with us. He didn't go sit down and screw off while we were doing all the stuff, the hard work or whatever. He was right there with us. That was powerful, because that was rare, actually, from my experience seeing other guys. He loved us. Mm-hmm. Like he actually told us, he was like, I love you more than my wife and kids. I'm still good friends with him to this day. But he really did. He still talks about these experiences we have together. So I don't know, like, it definitely changed us. And I think it's safe to say most of the GWOT guys that went to Afghanistan and Iraq, they grew in ways that they didn't think they would ever grow.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I wanted to ask you, as a GWOT vet, after everything's said and done, I don't know how many tours did you end up doing?
I just did one, because so I was gonna stay in and re-up, but we had just gotten extended twice, and my ETS date was like just right around the corner. And so I just said, you know what, if I want to come back, I'll come back. So, but I didn't because for whatever reason, like everything started to fall apart. So like all kinds of changes started to be made right when I was ETS, and with digital camo was coming out. Um, like I want to say the early signs of the woke agenda started coming out. Um, there was like this attitude, like if you're in basic training, holding up like these sensitivity cards, like
Yeah.
I want to be yelled. Like things were just getting really weird, and we were getting pissed, like a lot of us. And I was one of those guys. I was just like, whatever's going on right now, this isn't what we know. Like this is weird.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which is interesting because now looking back 20 years later, it's like a night and day change. But like we saw it coming, we just didn't understand it.
Right.
Now we kind of really bizarre.
Huh. And reflecting on the war itself, and I mean, you talk to other vets and stuff. Like, what's the consensus? What do people generally say about it? Like, what's your? Because you're an early GWOT guy,
Yeah.
and I guess I wanted to ask, how does that differ from late GWOT? Because it's a 20-year freaking war, and how do you guys see the war, like looking back at it?
Well, this is really interesting. I think this is the most interesting question right now, is because there's a lot of signals that there's a lot of cross signals on this topic of like what was the point or whatever. I have more of an esoteric take, um, and I don't know if you want me to share it or not. Because I think it's easy to say that we went in there and lost or whatever, both Afghanistan and Iraq, and I just don't see it that way.
Right? No, please share. Like
Yeah,
it just
I feel like
yeah.
okay, so like the invasion of Iraq, the Marines went in and just completely toppled Iraq. They folded. That's how I see it, and that we just under the guise of trying to install a democracy in Iraq, just kind of became the police there,
Mm-hmm.
and that was just a bad strategy if you're all around. But a lot of people will say we failed, and I hear this all the time, that we there was the forever wars and we lost and all this stuff. Same with Afghanistan. The Afghanistan pullout, by the way, was a shit show. But my take is basically, if we wanted the oil, we would have taken it. My whole thing is like, before 2003, we just did not have the skill embedded in the populace to withstand an invasion or some kind of a weird attack. We didn't have thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of men, and I guess women too, skilled with being able to shoot and do small arms tactics, maneuvering, raids, clearing buildings, and having the experience of being in the sandbox. And now, like, we have the most. We have more warriors than anybody else in the world embedded into our populace, not even serving right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at that, I'm like, well, maybe that's the real resource that like the neocons were after.
Mm-hmm.
Weird shit. Like, because I'm trying to make sense, like.
Right.
So, and I'm not trying to tangent too much here. I'm just looking at it as, okay, well, if it wasn't trade routes and it wasn't, finite resources, and it sure as hell wasn't democracy. I mean, maybe it was, but the most precious of those resources is having skilled warriors throughout your populace.
Agreed. Yeah.
What if a massive race war went awry, or ISIS broke out in Mexico and partnered with cartels or what have you? Well, now you have at least some sort of a fighting chance to defend, on as a national security.
For my vibe of America before GWOT, it felt almost like it was almost like a republic of lambs. You know what I mean? Like a bunch of like pussy people from Office Space, and at the end of the day, what happened is that people kind of, I guess GWOT really like woke a lot of people up in the sense of like slapped them to reality, and kind of honed, almost made wolves, like, which in a good way, like good wolves, like the Roman Republic, Romulus and Remus, they're seen suckled by a wolf, right? Not a freaking sheep. They're not seen as like little herbivores. They have fangs, and I think that was a good thing because it brought back those martial values and it gave you value to what you have here. You know what I mean? It made you understand what was the value of like the republic that we have now, and what it costs ultimately. You know what I mean? People pay the price, and that it's like real shit. And I completely agree with you. I understand where you're coming from because it's like, if you think about it geopolitically, like America didn't really gain anything. We were able to get oil from Russia, Saudi Arabia, anyone else, doesn't really matter. Okay. Also, we're finding oil technology and oil deposits within the United States. All right. But and I think the other reason, okay, destabilize the region to favor Israel, but I think that's also kind of doesn't make sense because they already had everything squared away. They weren't really threatened by Iraq. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it makes you think, like, maybe the case is, like, as simple as it sounds, it was just trying to get Americans to freaking, like, be who they were supposed to be, which is, like, an imperial power. You know what I mean? And build, like, men and women, citizens, of that kind. Have you ever heard of, like, Starship Troopers, by any chance?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What's your opinion on it?
Well, I mean, it's been a while, but yeah, I mean,
I guess the basic idea.
My thing is like we were a soft target,
Uh-huh.
populace-wise, in America. We just had guys that liked to hunt, and we had old Vietnam guys that were, old. We didn't have anything else going on in the prime fighting age in the American Republic. And then for the last 20 years, we've had wave after wave or deployment after deployment of people gaining this experience, whether it's right or wrong. We're a hard target now if there is a land invasion or anything like that. And I'm just looking at it. I'm just like, to me, that's what, whether that was the intent or not, I mean, I doubt it's the intent, but like in hindsight, it's probably a good idea that we are, that we have a bunch of SF guys who have tons of deployments. And because right now, like, I don't care about anybody's opinion on politics or whatever. I take what Eric Prince says and all the SF guys that are like, Clay Martin, these guys, I listen the pulse that they're giving, and I'm just like, okay, that's the spearhead of society for me, is these guys who have the most intimate teams. They're sharing their opinions, and I value that so much because to me, like that's the spear tip of the warrior spirit in our, and that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, man. Like, I think one of the greatest things about like the military and like soldiers and warriors in general is that, like, I don't know, they're the few ones that are actually able to fucking say things as they are, like make teams, get things done, have the initiative, and you don't see that kind of ruggedness and aggressiveness when it comes to the United States with like regular civilians and stuff like that. So anyway, I just don't want to take you for too long here. So just any last thoughts that you wanted to share before we just sign off?
Yeah, I'm just thankful that that you were willing to offer me an opportunity to share these things on GWOT, or at least Iraq, on the Iraq side of things, because I very much appreciate your sincerity towards the frontline guys, the lower ranking guys who really were the kind of like the spine of the operations, and really you know, I don't think they need recognition or anything like that, but it's nice for the public to hear, you know, kind of what it's like, so they can kind of put their mental feet into this arena, so to speak, and
Mm-hmm.
get an idea of it.
And
Um,
I appreciate you saying that, and I guess I wanted to tell the legionaries why I do this, and you know, for instance, like Ed, first of all, thank you for coming on and sharing, you know, especially like very personal thoughts and memories and stuff. I know it can be difficult, and I know it
my
can
own,
be, you know, yeah, it can be like one of those things that's like not so pleasant. But the reason why we do this is because ultimately, you know, you go on the internet, you go on TV, you go elsewhere, and what do you see? You see crap. You see
mhm.
like people living a shitty life. You see like people trying to spread values that destroy you. And you know, you read history books, for instance, from these people, and you know the woke stuff or whatever. And it's always about saying how small people were. You know, men and women, how small they were, how pathetic they were, and never about how great they were. And I understand, like, if you're in the military, anyone has been in the military, there's this ethos of, you know, being humble and, like, you know, just, you know, doing your duty and just, like, doing your part, and, you know, that's that. But what ends up happening is there's a dearth of, like, cultural and generational knowledge and wisdom. And there's a lack of role models, man. And that's the other thing, too, that, like, people don't understand is, especially when you like nowadays where most people's parents are divorced, you know, they don't have like a good solid archetype to build, you know, people off of. And I remember when I was a kid, you know, like I said, looking at that TV when I was like freaking 8, 9, 10, you know, I saw you guys and I was like, you know, just like you saw those SF guys, I saw you guys, and I was like,
Well,
that was just like, you know, a beam of light for me, and I was like, I need to be this. This is what I need to be. I dedicate my entire life to this, and it's because of you guys. And like I said, of course, special forces guys are cool. They're high achievers and all that. But you know what? No one's talking about the line. No one talks about the guys that were there for 16 months on end. You know, endlessly freaking dealing with bullshit. Or, for instance, the, you know, the harsher discipline that exists, or the kinds of, how do you say, miscarriages of justice, as I'm sure you're aware of,
yeah,
and the things that, you know, and what's worse, I think that the veteran community punifies people talking about their experiences, and the few people who end up doing so anyway are like very full of themselves, if that makes sense. And
yeah,
so I want to kind of stop that. I want people to, like, you know, feel, to glorify, like, you know, the, not the average, that's the wrong word to say, but basically the real freaking combat experience that happened. Because at the end of the day, how many of us are going to be Jocko Willings, David Goggins, whatever,
right.
you know, John Ripley types, you know what I mean? But there's like glory to be had with the freaking, you know, grunt, with the you know, armor guy, the artillery guy, the logistician guy, freaking driving a truck through fucking Baghdad to make sure you got your food and shit, and, like, you know, obviously experiencing all the elements of combat and stress which exist. And you know, my aim, and whoever's listening, and for you too, Ed, but like, I want to freaking record every single veteran's freaking experience, no matter how humble it is, especially if it's of like the line. And when I say the line, this is the, you know, when I say the line, it's basically people that were doing regular army, regular military type stuff, and you know, not special forces, if that makes sense. And I'm okay with doing special forces as well. But what I'm trying to explain is, you know, you guys deserve this kind of, I don't know, more than simply thank you for your service. Like, that's bullshit, and you know it's bullshit. At the end of the day, like, you guys have made such a massive impact, not simply on the world, but on ourselves, myself included. And I want to make sure that you guys, you know, are preserved into the future and serve as a archetype to, you know, model ourselves after and to look up to, you know, and to fill your big old boots. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
so that's what matters to us. And you know, like I said, this is what the Project Atlantis Legion is about: re-imbibing the martial spirit and warrior spirit in the United States. And anyway, Ed, I just want to say thank you for what you've done. Seriously.
Thank you, Lance. Big time. Appreciate the opportunity to share some light on the 0304 Iraq era, GWOT era.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. Well, thank you so much. And anyway, this is General Lance and Sergeant Barnes and Ed, and I'll link him in the description below where you can find him on Twitter. But this is the War Room signing off.